nice to see everybody again. All right, here we go. Got a couple more. So we're just about there. We've got 3 to go.
Carry with them a lot of information that the director doesn't need to actually explain, but it's implicit in their behaviour.
Are there many movies that kind of rise above the need to stereotype drugs?
Well, see, I think Human Traffic was a movie in that it, whilst there's a lot of drugs in it, it's really just about ordinary folk getting together for a weekend after they've been working at not very exciting find some of these movie clips disturbing. So there you go. Just a bit of flashiness, and that's me. What I'm going to be talking about is how we learn about something which, when we're talking about illicit drugs, is done behind closed doors. And part of my thesis, if you like, is that movies have a profound influence on how we construct our world and how we maintain our world. It, I guess, is apparent that drugs and drug use have become embedded in mythologies in Western society. And it's not surprising when we look at this research by SADA. It says 15, this is a North American sample, might be a bit different here, might be 14 years here or something. But on average, we estimate we're watching movie pictures 15 years old, Waking Nuns, which is incredible. There was a snapshot over a 4-year period, 1996 to 97, of commercial movies, which is mostly from Hollywood, but not exclusively. And in it, 90% of those movies showed drug use, of which about 22% showed illicit drug use, and about a quarter of that, 22%, quarter of those showed explicit drug use and preparation. So, in some senses, we're saturated by the use of drugs. So obviously, alcohol and tobacco would be in the great majority of the movies. Otto Kernberg has said that movies are the most engaging of mass communication. The idea of being in a movie house where you are confined and surrounded by the experience. Some people say, like Jenny Wedding would say, that it can be so intense that there is a kind of a dissociative state, which an altered state of being whilst you're watching a movie, especially if you enjoy the movie and are so-called engrossed within the movie. So it's with that in notion is that, well, I posit, and I'll go into further details about why movies have a great influence on us, and particularly how we understand drugs and drug use. So, 1895, the Lumiere brothers, first public showing. It only took 11 years before the first movie that I could find anyway on explicitly on drug use is The Dreams of the Opium Smoker. So that's in 1906. Victorine Jassé was the director of that movie. Followed a few years later by regulation. It always comes along. There was this.
1909 was the same year that the beginnings of the global regulations occurred.
Right,
It's a centenary celebration.
Right, so this is just part of this
conspiracy about us.
I'm sure cocaine had been taken out of Coca-Cola by then. What was it?
Yeah, around about the year, yeah.
I guess the idea of film censorship was that the power of the movies was such that it could pervert individuals or incite moral panic. And so hence film censorship came on quite early on in the career of the movies. What I want to talk about next really is how do movies influence us, and a number of thoughts I have about this, utilising a range of other people who've thought about it a lot more than I have. One could say that movies are like a library or an archive, like a cultural reservoir, and we often use movies to, particularly documentaries for example, to look back in time and see how people were portrayed in movies, which isn't necessarily how people were, but it's often taken to be how people were. It's movies, they, in some senses, make history. And they also possibly dictate society's norms and values. So this is what I'm saying, the power of the movie. It is the director, if you like, using the metaphor of a mirror to reflect real life. It's the director who determines the distortion of real life. And if you're using glass in itself, because it suits the lens, if you like, it is that idea of the opaqueness, the transparency, the distortion of the lens. But at the same time, the idea is that films do reflect human experience and real life, however distorted it may be. We come to learn about the world and have cognitions about ourselves, in particular drug use, if you like, through what is around us. And this is that social learning theory. And I guess it's that idea of how do we learn about something, for example sex, where there are no direct socializing methods. So it's not as though this is how you do it and you're taught that at school with live performances, if you like, because that would be a taboo thing to do. And you could apply the same thing to other activities which are conducted behind closed doors, such as illicit activities and drug taking. So how do we learn about these things? Well, we learn them from direct experience. We learn them indirectly through stories told by other people. So there's a narrative involved in that, a discourse. And we also learn through indirect socializing methods, such as books, magazines, TV, and the movie.